Hi, my name is Shashidhar Nanjundaiah, and I'm co-teaching this course with Jennifer Horton, as you know. I thought that in this short kind of introductory video, I should informally problematize the term media literacy before we move forward. We will, of course, continue this problematization as we go along, but at this point, there are a couple of points that you should know about media literacy, and I thought this might be a good opportunity for you to get to know me a little bit, and also for me to tell you a little bit about what I think of media literacy. Jennifer, as you know, is the information expert between us, and I'm the person in charge of the media part of this course. Of course, we know media and information go hand in hand today. It's almost impossible to consider information that's outside of what the media bracket for us, whether it's through an aggregating application such as a search engine or directly through the media or social media platforms. So it's easy to imagine the millennials as this digital generation, perhaps the Gen X as the television generation, maybe the boomer generation is the radio generation, although the boomer generation is actually the television generation. And the earlier generations as the real newspaper generation. Then in that case, what is today's generation? The post-millennials or the Gen Z or the Gen Me or whatever they call them these days. I think we can agree that we are all part of a smart media generation, regardless of how old we are. Think about it. It's a smartphone generation for sure, but the smartphone includes this mind-boggling convergence of all the technology that's been available to us, or at least made available to us in this single device. And that single device is, of course, really a symbol for what I mean. I mean, it could be a laptop, but from print to audio, video, graphics, AI, all that newfangled stuff. We today have virtual reality. It's all newfangled for me. This convergence of all the available content genres from information to misinformation, opinion, entertainment, everything in between. And above all, the convergence of the producer and the consumer of all that content. I like to call this new person a media prosumer. A prosumer is basically, producer and consumer merged together linguistically, somewhat cleverly, I think. So this convergence of a receiver and a producer is also a convergence of the mix of content on a mix of platforms. So it's really a convergence from various directions. And if there's anything that brought equality of opportunity in communication, it is this new smartness, the smart media prosumerism. It's got a whole lot of benefits, but has it also brought problems along with it? What has it dragged in? For example, has it brought more or less social equity? Has it brought more or less understanding within us as social individuals about our own life, about the communities and societies around us, about our world? In other words, has this new smartness made us smarter at all? Or has it made us realize how unsmart we might be? And so when you think about media literacy, you would think about these, right? Like media literacy seeks to address these questions. And therefore, in a way, these should be the questions that are at the back of our minds as we traverse this course. But the question that springs to my mind constantly when I learn more about media literacy is, what is that illiteracy that the proponents of media literacy must assume that people have that is so pervasive, it seems, in the society that they need to solve this media illiteracy. They must resolve it in the form of media literacy. So just the composition of this class, ranging from journalism students to engineering students to aviation majors, tells us a thing or two about the relevance of media and information literacy to all of us as media prosumers. Hopefully, there are several of us from international backgrounds, at least few of us from international backgrounds. I am, and our experiences can completely challenge some of the basic assumptions that we might make in this country, and that's true for every country that you might go to. The local kind of assumptions are so different from assumptions that people make in other countries. Still, as Mark Doisy is a media scholar who wrote a book called Media Life. There is no denying that we live a media life. We are consumed by media to the extent that we live in a media ecosystem. Doisy claims that we live it like zombies. The ecosystem we live in is mediated, meaning that there is an interference by the media in pretty much everything that we do actively. Whether we live it like zombies or not is debatable. But we've come a long way from the time that scholars wrote about how people use the media for specific gratifications. So the biggest divide between those traditional forms of media, such as newspapers, television, radio, which we somewhat now call the legacy media, somewhat dubiously, I think, and how those traditional forms have themselves adapted to the newer forms of media platforms to attract the new consumer. So those legacy media platforms have themselves digitized themselves in order to attract new consumers, this producer, consumer, or the prosumer of media. So the media, when we talk about the media, whatever form they might be in, so talking about the divide between the legacy media and the new digital media, where the obvious divide is through interaction or interactivity, and also something technical, such as whether it's analog or digital, how the signals are manufactured and disseminated. But really, the media are bound, whatever be the form, by three imperatives. One is the production, two is influences, and three is biases. So there is no media content that is bereft of these three imperatives. So as you can imagine, part of these imperatives is technological, and we really can't help it, like the production. And some are psychological, such as biases and influences. Some are sociological. Influences would be sociological. But historically, it's been the objective of media literacy to help a learner understand these imperatives. So understanding then gives rise to all those definitions of media literacy that we talk about, access, analysis, and production, and everything in between. But really, is media literacy a new thing? Like, did former President Donald Trump suddenly make us realize that we need a lesson or two in what the media are doing to us, so to speak? No, because the alleged, kind of subterfuge and deceit by the presidential candidates of 2016 seems pretty bizarre to us, because they happened in the American framework of democracy. They happened at a time that digital media enabled us to understand in hindsight what was being done. So it's important that we understand these concepts in specific contexts. Like I said, the American framework of democracy is a framework in which we must understand Trump. we must understand Hillary Clinton, and we must understand the things that happened during the 2016 presidential election. So these are political, social, and cultural contexts, right? Like, and historical even, of course. The kinds of social barriers to speech and behavior within a community in, for example, the Middle East or in India or elsewhere is not something that we expect to see in the United States. The fabric of society itself is very different in say, the villages of southeastern Africa, where a lot of communities live in clusters, and those clusters have their own hierarchies, and cultural practices are celebrated on a routine ritual basis. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Zulu word Ubuntu. Ubuntu refers to a communitarian sense of compassion and togetherness rather than us and them kind of otherness. So the communitarian sense of compassion and togetherness also is a form or is practiced in a form of communication that is more ritual. Whereas the us-them kind of communication is more a transmissional form of communication. And that is a one, it's like this telephone line, right? Like 1, 2. So there are two people or many people communicating linearly with each other. Whereas Ubuntu is this concept where the communication is really circular and often ritual and often bereft of a central theme around which a conversation must happen, for example. Like, so do people around South Africa who practice Ubuntu consume media differently? Maybe as a community or individuals within the community? How would that be different from the so-called individualistic ways in which we have been taught to operate communication? So these are some of the questions that must spring to our minds as we take this course, because we don't want to be stuck in contexts that we understand and not be able to understand other contexts. So much of the media literacy program operates basically to dispel misgivings, misinformation, and misunderstandings about what we learn from other people. Media literacy often situates the so-called real media at an objective center of our truths. But in reality, we have always operated on beliefs and trust. And that's why I use the word objective in a very critical fashion. Unfortunately, much of our trust in our institutions has eroded, as statistics will tell us these days. Less than 1 in 6 people in the United States actually say they trust the media, for example. That's institutional trust. Only 1 in 6 people seem to have it. Then where does that trust go? What happens to that trust? Do we create new centers of trust where we place individuals or communities or families, other institutions maybe? What is replacing that institutional trust? Is impersonal trust, which is that institutional kind of trust, being replaced by personal trust, which is basically going back to tribal forms, right? So think about these things. And if that trust is indeed being replaced, should the focus of our attention in media literacy be towards that? These are some larger philosophical questions that trouble me, but I wanted you to be aware of the problems that exist within the traditions of media literacy itself before we embark on it. In this class, the hope is that we can make you think about these concepts, make you think in general, be critical consumers of the media, but also critical producers of the media and critical understanders of what a media literacy itself is. And media literacy is, of course, is somewhat different from information literacy. And and yet they must go together to a fuller understanding about structures and content. We are going to get very granular, how to retrieve information, how to read an ad or a film, and so on. We will be discussing contemporary events and issues. Some will be political, and it is impossible not to be political today with the kind of content we receive. So the point should be is students of media literacy, we should be equally concerned about the what and the why, as well as with the how or how to do something. So we must think about these questions. Really, therefore, media literacy program is like an awareness program, and just as literacy is, like you're aware of something. So it's not merely tools, it's a kind of a competency. And being aware of biases helps us determine which direction our decisions should take in real life. How does an ad affect my decision for purchase, for example? One key question in media literacy is, what am I not seeing or what am I not hearing? That is the critical question that leads to the concept that media literacy scholars are so concerned with, which is critical thinking. So media literacy then can enable both rights and responsibilities of the media consumer and the producer. So the rights and responsibilities of a media prosumer is both said and unsaid in many ways. Another unsaid thing in media literacy often is ethics. How can I be an ethical media prosumer? An ethical media prosumer is a media literate prosumer. As we go along this course, we will realize that. So my hope in helping you also understand some of these philosophies or the philosophical underpinnings of media literacy is that each of you can become an ambassador of media and information literacy, not just be media literate yourself, but help the communities around you be media literate in whatever way. So in some ways, we will treat this as a training course in media literacy that can be taken forward in a kind of a network model of delivery, if you will. So there will be readings every week. There will be videos every week. There will be discussions some of the weeks. There will be assignments or quizzes every week. So one tip here is that do the readings first, then watch the videos, because some of those videos refer back to those readings, and some reading will be kind of dense. But that speaks to the nature of this serious-minded effort we're trying to make here in making you more media literate. So until next week, or actually until this week, I guess, take care, happy reading, happy watching, and here's another step towards media literacy then. Have a great week. Bye.